Leave now? That is the stark, urgent warning from the United States government to its citizens in Iran. Not a suggestion, not an advisory. A direct order: U.S. citizens should leave Iran immediately. This alert, issued via the U.S. Virtual Embassy Iran, is one of the most severe travel warnings the State Department can issue. It signals a profound and immediate danger. We are not talking about a standard caution. This is a flashing red siren for Americans in the country. Why now? What intelligence has prompted this critical directive at this precise moment? And what does it mean for the already volatile landscape of the Middle East? This is not just a travel update. This is a potential prelude to a major geopolitical crisis. Stay with us. To understand why this "leave now" warning is so explosive, we must rewind the tape. The United States and Iran have not had formal diplomatic relations since the 1979 Islamic Revolution and the subsequent hostage crisis at the U.S. Embassy in Tehran. For decades, communication has been fraught, conducted through intermediaries or via the Swiss embassy. In 2011, the U.S. State Department created the Virtual Embassy Tehran, an online platform. It is not a physical embassy. It is a website. Its purpose: to provide Iranian citizens with information about U.S. policies and visa procedures, and to serve as a critical lifeline for any U.S. citizens inside Iran. This virtual portal is now the source of today's grave alert. But this isn't the first severe warning. Tensions have been at a boiling point for years. The collapse of the 2015 nuclear deal, known as the JCPOA, under the Trump administration, and the failed attempts to revive it under Biden, set the stage. Iran has rapidly advanced its nuclear program, now enriching uranium to 60% purity, a short technical step from weapons grade. Simultaneously, Iran's regional proxy network, the Axis of Resistance, has been increasingly active. From Hezbollah in Lebanon to Houthi rebels in Yemen to Shiite militias in Iraq and Syria, these groups, backed by Tehran, have launched hundreds of attacks on U.S. forces and allies since the October 7th Hamas attack on Israel. The timeline is critical. In the last 6 months, we've seen a dangerous escalation. U.S. troops stationed in Iraq and Syria have faced repeated drone and rocket attacks. The U.S. has responded with targeted airstrikes. The Houthis have disrupted global shipping in the Red Sea. Then, in January, a drone attack killed 3 U.S. service members at a base in Jordan. The U.S. directly blamed Iran-backed militias and responded with major strikes. The shadow war is becoming less shadowy. And sitting in the middle of this are dual nationals and U.S. citizens in Iran, who have historically been used as political pawns. The arrest and detention of Americans on espionage charges is a long-standing tactic. The warning today suggests the U.S. believes the risk of that happening again, or something worse, is imminent and extreme. So let's break down the alert itself. The message on the U.S. Virtual Embassy Iran site is unequivocal. Dated recently, it states, due to the risk of kidnapping, arbitrary arrest, and detention, U.S. citizens should not travel to Iran. But it goes much further for those already there. U.S. citizens in Iran should leave immediately. This is a do not travel advisory, the State Department's highest risk level, alongside countries like Afghanistan, Syria, and Ukraine in active conflict zones. The language is specific and terrifying. It cites the danger of kidnapping and the risk of arbitrary arrest and detention. It notes that U.S. passports are invalid for travel to Iran, and that the U.S. government's ability to provide emergency services to citizens there is extremely limited. Crucially, it warns that Iranian authorities have detained U.S. citizens on spurious charges for years to gain political leverage. This is a direct reference to individuals like Siamak Namazi, who was held for nearly 8 years, and others who have been used in high-stakes prisoner swaps. Why issue this now with such urgency? Our analysis of 5 key sources, including statements from the Pentagon, Iranian state media, regional security analysts, and diplomatic wires, points to a confluence of alarming factors. First, intelligence chatter. U.S. agencies are likely intercepting communications or receiving human intelligence, indicating that Iranian security apparatuses, particularly the powerful Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, have been given orders to identify and potentially detain U.S. citizens. This could be a retaliatory measure for upcoming U.S. actions or a preemptive hostage-taking strategy ahead of a wider conflict. Second, the military posture. The U.S. has recently bolstered its forces in the region. An aircraft carrier strike group remains deployed. There are credible reports of the U.S. and Israel preparing for potential strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities if diplomacy completely fails. Iran, in turn, has threatened a severe, extensive, and painful response to any attack. In this environment, Americans on the ground become instant high-value targets. Third, the internal situation in Iran. The regime is facing significant domestic pressure from a restive population and a struggling economy. A classic diversionary tactic for authoritarian regimes under internal stress is to create an external crisis. Detaining Americans creates a dramatic international incident that can rally nationalist support and shift focus away from problems at home. The perspective from Tehran, however, is predictably different. Iranian state media has largely dismissed the U.S. warning as psychological warfare and propaganda. Government spokesmen argue it is part of a continued American campaign to destabilize Iran and isolate it internationally. They claim Iran is a safe country for all tourists, including Americans, and that such alerts are designed to damage Iran's economy and scare off potential business partners. This narrative is aimed at a domestic audience and international allies like Russia and China. But the opposition viewpoint, from Iranian diaspora groups and human rights organizations, tells a darker story. They affirm the U.S. warning is not only valid but overdue. They point to the systematic use of hostage diplomacy. The Iranian judiciary and IRGC intelligence routinely bring bogus charges of espionage, collaboration with a hostile government, or propaganda against the state. The trials are often held behind closed doors, with evidence obtained through coercion. For the regime, an American citizen is not just a person. They are an asset, a bargaining chip worth billions in frozen funds, or the release of Iranian operatives held abroad. International reactions are muted but deeply concerned. European allies, who still have physical embassies in Tehran, are reviewing their own security protocols. They are caught in a difficult position, trying to maintain diplomatic channels for nuclear negotiations while recognizing the severe risk to their own nationals. Israel's government has issued no official statement on the U.S. alert, but analysts there view it as a confirmation of their long-held assessment that Iran is an existential threat that operates through terrorism and hostage-taking. Gulf Arab states like Saudi Arabia and the UAE, which have recently sought détente with Iran, are watching nervously. A flare-up that draws in the U.S. directly threatens their own security and economic stability. The deeper implication here is the effective end of even virtual diplomacy. This leave now order signifies that the U.S. believes the minimal protective channels that exist, primarily through the Swiss, may be severed or useless in a crisis. It is a preparation for a scenario where all Americans are advised to be out before the doors slam shut, metaphorically and possibly literally. It also places immense pressure on the estimated hundreds of U.S. citizens, including dual nationals, in Iran. For many, leaving is not simple. They may have family, property, or businesses. Exiting requires navigating an Iranian bureaucracy that now knows they are under orders to flee, potentially making them more suspicious and more likely to detain them at the border. Let's talk about the human impact, the real people caught in this geopolitical storm. First, the U.S. citizens and dual nationals. Imagine you are an Iranian American visiting elderly parents in Tehran. You see this alert. Panic sets in. Do you rush to the airport? That could draw attention. Do you try to leave via land border? Which one? Turkey, Afghanistan, Pakistan all have their own risks. Selling property or closing a business is impossible in hours. You must abandon assets. You face an agonizing choice: leave family behind or put them at risk by associating with you. The financial cost is devastating. The emotional toll is worse. For the broader Iranian population, this is another step towards total isolation. It will further cripple an economy already strangled by sanctions. Any remaining foreign business personnel from neutral countries will also reconsider their presence, fearing being caught in the crossfire or mistaken for Americans. This drains the country of expertise and investment, deepening the unemployment and inflation crisis. Socially, it breeds paranoia. Neighbors might report on each other. The already powerful security forces get another pretext for increased surveillance and control over daily life. Politically, this hardens the lines. Reformists or moderates within Iran who argue for engagement with the West are completely undermined. The hardliners in the IRGC can point and say, "See, America is preparing for war. We told you so." This empowers the most radical elements of the regime. Regionally, it raises the stakes for every proxy engagement. If a U.S. citizen is taken hostage in Tehran, how does the U.S. respond? Does it trigger a military rescue operation? That is a scenario fraught with peril. The potential for a single incident, a detention at the airport, a skirmish at sea, to spiral into direct conflict is now higher than it has been in decades. What happens next? The immediate next step is a frantic, behind-the-scenes effort by the Swiss and other intermediaries to secure safe passage for those Americans trying to leave. The U.S. military and intelligence will be on highest alert for any signs of Americans being apprehended. We will also watch Iran's response. Do they facilitate exits to avoid a crisis, or do they obstruct them to create one? Simultaneously, all diplomatic and military activity in the Persian Gulf will intensify. Every ship movement, every flight pattern will be analyzed for hostile intent. What are the experts saying? We've synthesized analysis from former diplomats, security consultants, and regional scholars. The consensus is grim. Dr. Karim Sajedpur, a Carnegie Endowment Iran expert, notes this warning is highly unusual in its clarity and urgency, and reflects a belief that the regime sees value in taking American hostages as its confrontation with Washington deepens. A former CIA operative specializing in the region told us the intelligence trigger was likely, specific, and credible, possibly indicating mobilization orders within the IRGC's intelligence wing. Comparisons are being drawn to the months leading up to the 1979 hostage crisis, though experts caution the dynamics are different. Then, it was a revolutionary government solidifying power. Now, it is an entrenched regime facing collapse and lashing out. A more apt comparison might be Russia's detention of Americans like Paul Whelan and Evan Gershkovich prior to and during the Ukraine war, a tactic of lawfare and hostage diplomacy used by adversarial states. The forecasts are concerning. Most analysts predict a rise in detentions of dual nationals from other Western countries as well, as Iran seeks leverage. The likelihood of a major kinetic incident, a direct Iranian attack on U.S. assets or vice versa, has increased from possible to probable in their models. The key variable is miscalculation. Neither side wants a full-scale war, but both are engaged in a high-stakes game of brinkmanship. An accident, a local commander overstepping, or a misinterpreted action could ignite a conflict that everyone says they don't want but is now becoming dangerously easy to start. The key takeaway is this: a routine travel warning this is not. This is a geopolitical distress signal. The U.S. government is telling its citizens that Iran is no longer just a dangerous place, but an active threat zone where their liberty and safety cannot be guaranteed. What to watch for in the coming days: reports of Americans successfully exiting or being hindered, any new detainment announcements from Tehran, and the positioning of U.S. naval assets in the Strait of Hormuz. This story is developing by the hour. For continuous coverage and deep dive analysis on this and other critical global events, make sure you are subscribed. Subscribe to Kenya News Update today for more breaking news.